Hey everyone, in this video I'll be covering Borderlands 4's newest major update, which brought about some buffs and nerfs to the different characters. And this is their third balance patch that was released since the game came out. Now, it's a sad day for Rafa fans because he caught a very large nerf. Now, previously with his level 60, he could get over 700% gun damage, which is now reduced to a max of about 500. Because his Dancer class mod, which is pretty much his only good class mod, caught a big nerf, losing 50% of its overdrive bonuses. So that means that not only is his gun damage impacted, if you like to go into the blue skill tree, this means your fire rate is impacted, your ammo regeneration, your gun handling, your critical hit chance, more gun damage, more accuracy, and more fire rate. All of this is impacted. Basically anything with the overdrive skill listed. And that's not all. Vex also caught a bit of a nerf with her witchy trigger finger, but on the good side, Cash and Harlowe, the two strongest characters in this game, they actually got some buffs. And some much needed Amon buffs, but I just don't think that they are enough to really justify it. But these patch notes were a little bit weird. There's some wording on it where it's talking about a fire-based skill and it refers to it like it's an electric-based attack for whatever reason. And unfortunately, these patch notes are kind of vague. If you look back to their previous patch notes, they listed out the increases that we got on certain abilities and items, and that is missing from here. And some of these read are really strange. For example, Rafa's Aaron Spark. This shock-filled power triggers when you fire missiles. It's weird because it is a incendiary damage-based ability. There's nothing shock about it other than the name. So maybe whoever wrote this doesn't play the game fully, but a little strange. But I'll go over to the changes that you guys would care about. World bosses will now appear more often, and it also appears that the nightmare rifts have a bit easier time showing up, but if you're going around the usual loop to find them, it may be a little bit harder. There were some updates to the DLC, just mostly fixing some of the bugs that may have occurred that you may have run into. You can just pause this here if you want to read it. Nothing super major here. They also made it so that if you're going to do the DLC, you can return back to the base game and not have issues with that. Another thing I do want to touch on is that someone from Gearbox I did see said that there is going to be the progression toggle coming to the game soon. So if you don't want the progression to be shared between all your characters, this obviously has a lot of back-end stuff going on whenever you toggle something like that. So it's not coming with this release and will likely come in a future one when they get that all worked out. Also, nightmare rifts are a little bit smoother from my testing. They're basically you're not going to be going and falling off the map as much anymore. And on top of that, you'll also have someone around to grab a second wind if you end up going down. They also don't do the jump scare, and they're going to stay around whenever you explore the map. Enemies also had some changes. The flying doll soldiers will no longer use order rocket launchers. They just basically fixed some of the enemy mechanics and AI on there. And also enemies can jump and move around in a much more lifelike way. So I've actually noticed that in some of the Ripper Drill sites, the enemies actually moved a little more natural, it seemed. And this is a devastating day for Extra Pickle fans because they removed him. And they made some other changes to the DLC alongside some changes to the Legend of the Stone Demon as well. Now, Harlowe actually got a bit of a buff with the way Elemental Eater now works. So if you play Red Skill Tree Harlowe, she ends up just dealing pure radiation damage at a certain point if you use her action skill, which is obviously an issue in Elemental Eaters. Now, this change is actually kind of interesting. So they'll take a portion of damage from action skills and elements rather than ignoring them completely. So they're now going to allow 20% of your action skill damage to go through, and Elemental Eaters will now allow 10% of your elemental damage to go through. Elemental weapons can now set enemies on fire, shock them, or apply statuses. Since this extra damage isn't reduced by their traits, high chance elemental guns are now more powerful against them. So basically what this means is if you're using a weapon that's going to be able to apply status damage on them, anything with like a really high % chance and damage per second. Unfortunately, my game is really laggy right now. You can kind of see it happening, so I can't really play too much of it right now. This latest update has dropped my frames by about 40%, and the performance is rough. I actually filmed this video entirely yesterday. I spent 30 minutes going through the entire video, and my game was crashing nonstop the entire time, and I had issues with that video, so that's why this video is coming out a bit delayed. But honestly, I think that that's an okay change, honestly. It's making it so that the enemies with Elemental Eater aren't super annoying. They just don't feel like you're not going to notice them as much if you're playing as a character that was previously countered hardcore by them. Now, they also changed some progressions and now work properly, and like some certain achievements weren't activating on certain pieces of gear. One thing that I want to mention that I noticed and actually did notice is your vault cards will consistently give you new things to do every single day. This was previously an issue with the vault cards. I don't know if you guys experienced it, but I was getting the same challenges every single day on my characters, and it was kind of annoying because some of them were like absolutely brutal and they would take a while for them to update. I've noticed the last 3 days I've gotten new ones every single time. They also made some small changes to like the world and exploration here, nothing like super massive, but they improved multiple grapple points across the map. I haven't really noticed that in particular, but I do know there were some that just weren't that smooth. But this is what we really care about, the Vault Hunter changes. And actually, before we jump into this, I want to talk about the Crazed Earl. This is something I was talking about in my previous video a lot at the start. This gun lost 1/3 of its damage for some reason. I'm not sure if this was meant to be a bug. There were some changes to the gun itself. This gun here, I previously had it at 27,000 DPS. It is now stuck at 9,000, and things like the slippery grenade no longer triggered. This is actually pretty brutal for this gun because this is one of my favorite Pearlescents. Also, the Crow Source is now a little bit worse too. So yeah, both of these guns end up catching nerfs. The only two good Pearlescent weapons, unfortunately, are now nerfed. But Cash, now Cash actually got some changes here to his class mods as well as his kit. So defeating the Kragans with a snowball will consistently give you a stack of fortune. Wasn't aware that it was not working there, but the cooler class mod, which is an interesting one because he's got so many better ones out there, but this is now updated so that it basically can feed into itself. So whenever Cash deals ordnance damage to an enemy, they become jinxed. Whenever he kills that jinxed enemy, he gets a plus 20% ordnance cooldown rate for 12 seconds. That can stack upwards of 10 times. This allows him to now interact with his own jinx and ordnance damage for more tricky combat setups. So that class mod is a bit better now. Cash will now also hold the correct card. So what this means is whenever you go into his skill tree here, and whenever you select the blue skill tree, he's going to hold up the cards that he's using, and it'll show the two first augments that you select for him. They also did change one of his heads here. So the Gambler got a bets here, which is one of the heads that you can get, is now updated to look a little bit different. Now Cash's green skill tree ended up getting some buffs here. So roll the bones. I actually really enjoy this one here. It's all about totems and debuffs. I disagree. It's all about can't stop winning. This gives you that critical hit chance to go into windfall. That's really the best skill for this green skill tree. Totems and debuffs come second to this. But basically now, whenever you go down in combat, your bones will no longer, or your bone totems will no longer go away. Or if you were to summon in a vehicle previously, they would disappear. So this now changed that so that it does not go away. Gun damage from angry totems will also expire when traveling to a new map or initiating mission replay. There was a bit of a glitch with that here, and his angry totems could basically give you infinite scaling damage, which was kind of silly. They fixed that there. Now they also made changes to the luckless feat here. Now luckless is a little bit weird, and I've spoken about this in the past because the jinx icon, for whatever reason in the game, when you look at the jinxed here, it says enemy damage dealt minus 30% and enemy damage taken plus 20%. This now matches this one. For some reason, these both have the same ability, talking about jinxed, but they were wrote completely different. It was actually kind of backward how it was wrote, so they updated to now match properly. And blue skill tree actually got some nice buffs here. So the sleight of hand, which is his action skill, this skill will recharge when you enter your windfall state while fighting for your life. So that's quite nice. Piercing Bolt, Thunder the Table here. So this ability is actually kind of funny because if you use the Whale class mod, this gives you increased action skill cooldown rate, which the Whale class mod will turn into action skill damage, and that's how you get the blue skill tree to do some insane amounts of damage. But they actually made a nice change here because Thunder the Table, the card itself sucks so bad. This has a Piercing Bolt that zigzags forwards, and when you're in Windfall, it'll shock all nearby enemies. Now, it previously did not hit all nearby enemies, so slight boost to the DPS when you're mobbing, which is nice because I hated to grab this card just because it basically did nothing. There's also a change to Wretched Shadows. So this was a melee override. Previously, it made it so you didn't deal melee damage with it. Now it's considered a melee attack, so anything that boosts up your melee damage will impact this. So nice buff. The blue skill tree ends up being a little bit better. Now, when we look at the red skill tree, there's actually quite a few changes here. So one being Trick Shot. So they added a cooldown to this one. This is not too much of a nerf, not really at all, because what was happening was with certain guns, Trick Shot would do some crazy stuff where it basically caused, if you played on console, to crash. And I don't even want to know what it would do right now with my game losing so many frames. I feel like it would be pretty rough. They also made a change to the Desperado augment here, which for whatever reason previously, it was causing you to apply bleed onto your grenades because this gives you an free grenade whenever you go into Windfall, and whatever reason was causing bleed to get applied to that. On top of that, it also made it so that for some reason, this was also stopping your shields from recharging, so that's fixed to not stop your shields from recharging. But nothing beats lead actually got kind of a big change. So we updated the math so your special elemental effusions will not convert to kinetic damage. So you can actually see it in the wording here. So a portion of all non-bonus elemental damage. Previously, it was all elemental damage, so they made it so it's non-bonus damage. Cash actually gets a considerable amount of bonus damage from things like the Hot Hand ability there. So another big change to this is a change that I know a lot of people will be upset with. If you use the Michael Rooker sniper rifle, which you can get from the Vault Card 1, Previously, while doing this, it would create like an infinite amount of the underbarrels and it would do some crazy stuff. I knew that was going to get nerfed, so I never used it in the build just for that reason, because it was very clearly going to get nerfed. And yeah, they did change this to no longer have it apply. And yeah, it was creating way too many projectiles and it would slow down the game. So that has been fixed. I knew that was coming. They also made some changes to Reckoning here, so they're much better at finding enemies and they'll no longer get stuck in the air. Also, there was a change to From Gloam to Glow, which is another one of Cash's best skills. This is actually a nice buff. So basically when a Psycho tries to blow up in your face, this will also now convert that damage into Overshield, which is what the point of Gloam to Glow does. There's also change to Bleed the Bad here, but I'm not too sure what they mean. Crossfire's burst fire is activated by Windfall, but with the class ability here, Crossfire's burst fire gains a chance to enter Windfall, and when he attempts to enter Windfall, he gets an action skill duration. I think they added something to this. I don't entirely know what that means. I know a lot of people are having issues with these notes. It seems like they were also updated from 2 days ago when I first read them. But yeah, across the board, Cash got buffs. It's nice. The only thing that changed is that the Rooker sniper rifle no longer just one-shots enemies, but I think we all knew that was getting nerfed. Now, Sir Amon actually got a lot of buffs here, but are they enough to make him worth using? I mean, he's good in the blue skill tree. The green skill tree got a lot of buffs, but for my testing, the blue skill tree still just reigns supreme. So some changes across the board. Forge drones now move faster. So this is actually interesting. I actually posted a build previously, and there's some interesting new mechanics here with Amon. I think he's going to be very powerful once he gets to a higher level cap, but with the level 60 now, this lets us take My Touch is Death. I posted a build whenever the level 60 dropped because I was theorizing that this would work, and it did. So whenever Amon deals melee damage, there's a chance to activate his kill skills. Things like There Is Only Red. You can max the stacks out of this really easily because meleeing is not something you typically want to do. But if you take the Blacksmith class mod, this gives you the Forge drone skills, and these deal melee damage. So that gives you a really easy way because they shoot at the enemies and they're dealing damage as well. So basically you're able to get your action skill, or you're basically able to apply Berserk and max out There Is Only Red using that. But still, Amon's best class mod ends up being purple ones. It sucks, but it's just the way it is. Now there's also changes, so shots from the Kickballer shotgun will now pass through your firewall, keeping you protected. This is something I've noted actually, is firewall after the last update, for some reason, certain rocket launchers actually get stuck whenever you shoot through it. Because previously I liked using the firewall because it gives the projectiles an increase of 25% damage and 50% movement speed. So you can shoot at these and hit the enemies a little bit easier. But I've noticed that his firewall, for whatever reason, would block a lot of guns. And they made a change so that it does work with the Kickballer shotgun, but I'm still noting that it does work, or it still causes issues with certain rocket launchers, but hopefully it'll get fixed. Now, a lot of these changes, again, they don't have the percentage-based updates like they've done in the past, so it's a little hard to tell how some of these updates ended up impacting a character, but I've tested it. The increased Forge drone damage dealt is just so bad, unfortunately. The problem with Forge drones is that they don't really deal much damage at all. Even if you max out all your abilities here, kind of similar to how Trouble on Vex works, they just don't do enough to make them worth taking. So even with all the buffs that the Forge drones got, and they actually got a few of them, they just don't do enough, unfortunately, which really does force you into using like the blue with the red skill tree frame on. As cool as the green skill tree is, you do have to kind of use some exploits to get as much damage out of it as possible. So I do hope that we see more buffs there down the road. Now they've made some changes to the Ordained Hammer here. So now deals ordnance damage in addition to their other types and a chance to cause a detonation, dealing cryo damage in an area. So they increased the detonation chance and added detonation damage. This has a 40% chance. Previously I think it was like a 30% chance, and they now deal a little bit more damage. So that is kind of nice. They also made change the Blast Furnace, which increases the damage dealt per stack and lower to max stacks. Basically what this does is it increases your damage dealt and it scales up a lot quicker. Previously I think it was like 30 stacks. Again, they didn't have any numbers there, and no one plays the green skill tree, so I'm sure no one really understands what this previously was, but it allows you to scale your damage up a little bit quicker versus how it was previously. They also made changes to Hone Point, increasing the critical hit chance here. But again, Forge drones, we don't care if they critically hit because they're not really doing anything worthwhile in terms of damage. So who cares if they get the crit, but it has an increased chance now. And also Armor of Contempt here, Overshield when he deals action skill damage. This is also increased, it's now 8%, I think it was 7% maybe previously, but yeah, that's a change. Also their notes are kind of weird in a weird order here. We're looking down here and over here, but they did make some changes to some of the other kits here, like one of his most powerful abilities Amon has is Heavy Plate here. So they actually boosted this quite a bit. So Heavy Plate will give you now 50% increased shield capacity. I think it was 40% previously, and Overshield is now increased increased by 60%, which I think was 50% previously. So Amon is now a little bit more tanky, which is nice because I'm pretty sure most people will spec into the skill tree, and the other choices at this level are not good. So I'm actually glad that they buffed this one up a bit. There was also a change to Titanium Knuckles. So this was previously buffed as well. It increased the melee damage. Now it increases the skill damage to match the melee damage. So they're both now 8%. It was previously 7%. So that's another 5% skill damage. It's something, I guess. Now, this was actually a nice change. Bulletstorm got increased gun damage per stack and increased the stack duration, so you do more damage for longer. I think this was a nice change. So whenever he applies the status effect, it's now 12.5% gun damage per stack, and this has a max stacks of 5. And this is actually a considerable change. So 12.5% per stack. Previously, this was only 7.5% per stack. So that, I think, is a nice change. The only thing that I want to note about that is that you're basically now incentivized to heavily invest into the blue and red skill tree, as that's a considerable increase to the overall damage. 25% extra gun damage from that. So, hey, I think that's nice. But the thing is, with any gun damage increases that Amon gets, heavy ordnances are guns and ordnances. So if you use a specialization, you basically get 1.5 times that amount. So that 25% is effectively 37.5% on a heavy ordnance. So that is actually a nice change, but again, it's impacting his best build. So I'm glad that they gave him that buff either way, but hey, something. They also did make changes to Brimming Vigor here, so this will give you an increased max health capacity by 10% and also 10% extra damage when full. So both of those got changed. There's also a change to one of Amon's best abilities with Ballistic Bulwark. So you can get this from a class mod, which is amazing, but Amon gains overshield when he deals ordnance damage, 10% of ordnance damage dealt. That is actually a considerable buff, so he's better at maintaining his overshield. There's also a change to Disco and Furnace, increasing his fire rate and the duration of these as well. And there was a change to Age of Ice. Now you get a 10% increase to damage to frozen enemies and bosses. So that's actually very nice. The only problem is Primal Surge is really good, so it's hard to want to take that. And there's actually some changes to Amon's class mod. So basically, if you're using the Elementalist here, this will now give you increased damage per affinity stack here. So this scales up your damage a bit. Still not really super worth using. There's also changes to the Blacksmith class mod, which increases the Forged Drone damage for each Forged Drone. So the more that you have out, they're going to increase their overall damage. Again, it's not really worth using because the Forged Drone's damage is just non-existent. So my thoughts. This is an interesting choice. I think it was good that they buffed Amon. He definitely needs it. Interesting to give him like that 25 or 37.5% extra damage on his heavy ordnance. I thought that was quite the choice because now you're heavily incentivized to select this. Also changing it so that his ordnance gives him even more overshield. Yeah, it seems like they really want you to use the ordnance Amon, and unfortunately the green skill tree just it's not that good. I'm surprised that they buffed these skill trees and the best abilities in these skill trees so much, but hopefully we'll see some green skill tree Amon buffs in the future. Now Vex got some changes, and you can see here I'm having some, again, weird issues with not only frame rate dropping, but you can see here Vex has not appeared. If I click skills, she'll likely, yeah, there we go. Not sure what's going on with this, but there were some changes, and unfortunately a pretty hefty nerf. So Grave Power, one of Vex's best abilities, boosts kill skills. I understand why they changed this. So we adjusted interaction where a non-kill skill, Witchy Trigger Finger, was getting a boost that was not intended. So if you don't know, Grave Power increases the max stacks of her kill skills by 3 stacks. So for things like Grave Implements, this now gets 6 stacks, and it scales up her damage quite a bit. Funny enough, Witchy Trigger Finger also has 3 stacks, and this is going to give you 50% more gun damage per stack when you use your Eldritch Blast or Phase Explosion. So previously, it was allowing you to get upwards of 90% gun damage because it was getting that 6 stacks. Now it's only 3 stacks. I can understand why they changed this, but it does definitely suck a bit. Also, they made some changes to Bloodletter, but nothing really major. They just made it so that gun mounted, like if you're using your vehicle weapon, it can no longer apply bleed, but those don't really do that much damage anyway. There were some changes to good old Trouble here, but the unfortunate part is they're not really that great. So Trouble's health has increased, and it's still going down pretty quickly if you're playing an Ultimate Vault Hunter 6. Another thing, Trouble's melee attack damage has increased. It's still not enough. Like, I was thinking you could literally add 10 times the damage to Trouble's melee attacks, And even then, it would not be that great in Volt Under 6. I don't know what they could do to make Trouble a little bit more effective, but I know this is a very popular subclass for Vex, and a lot of people really want this one to be good. So yeah, even with the increases to damage and health, it's not really that worth it, but it also increased the reduced the cooldown, making it so that Trouble teleports a little bit more frequently. I did notice that, and it's nice because sometimes Trouble gets stuck. There were previous updates to the game that made that even better, so it's nice that they're making some changes, but I do think it needs a little bit more. They also made some changes to Blood is Magic, so Vex will deal increased action skill damage the higher her health, and this gives you now 10% per stack, so that's actually kind of a comparable, like a really good amount actually. Previously I think it was like 7 or 8, I can't remember the exact number, but that's a good change. And again, they don't have any of the numbers listed for this for whatever reason. There were also changes to Yowl and Bay. So there's 3 changes to this one here, funny enough. So Vex's minions have more max health capacity. It's now 10%, increased gun damage dealt by 7%, and also increased the duration to 12 seconds. I think previously it was 10 seconds there, and the gun damage was, I think, 5%. Now it's 7% per stack. Elemental Essence also got a change. I think it was 5%, now it's 6%. So this is even more elemental damage, and it's double when your action skill is active. So it's actually like a double kind of buff. These Spectres actually got a change here too, which is kind of cool. So when you're using these Spectres and you use the gun one here, it has an attack radius increase now. So it has an easier time hitting targets that are further away, which is nice because sometimes the Spectres just kind of suck. They don't know what they're doing. I also want to mention, if you're using these Spectres, Gastrobate here is a really good skill because you can use this, equip a heavy ordnance and do your dash, and then funny enough, they'll hold your ordnance and use whatever ordnance you're using. So if you got a fast fire rate, they'll have infinite ammo. It's actually kind of silly how powerful it can be, but this is only applicable if you do it this way. Vex also got some changes to her class mod. So the avatar here, what changed with this was that it now gives even more damage, but this one doesn't have any percentages, so it's a big mystery. You can imagine it increased. But one thing I do note is they also increased the attunement skill duration. So this was previously 60%, it's now 70%. That's kind of interesting because attunements, like when you switch to like a fire weapon, you get the fire attunement, but Vex's attunements aren't really that powerful. It's not something you're really going to be playing around too much. Obviously swap for different elemental health bars, but yeah, I still don't think that this is good when the Teen Witch class mod exists. I think this is one of the best. Oh, it's between this and one of Zane's class mods for the best in Borderlands history, in my opinion. The Teen Witch class mod is just so crazy. But they also made some changes to the Kindred Spirits class mod here. I don't know why they didn't pop up properly, but the Kindred Spirits increased the action skill cooldown rate. So that was 60%. Now it's 70%. And you can now get bonus minion damage from this too. So it, again, doesn't list how much bonus minion damage. It's a mystery for all of us to explore. And for my testing, it's not that good. Teen Witch is still by far her best. And even like the Scion or some of her like purple class mods with that crazy blood, yeah, it's just not really worth taking anything other than those two. And again, I'm just going to quickly mention the Crazed Earl is in a rough shape now, but perhaps not as bad as Rafa's nerfs. And yeah, this is rough, but Rafa, if you use a class mod that gives you extra points in this skill, the duration will last longer. So this is on his blue skill tree here. And this is actually kind of interesting. So whenever Rafa shocks an enemy, all shots fired at the enemy are critical hits for a duration. So this has a 2-second duration, and now actually will add an additional 4 seconds, total of 4 seconds. If you use a class mod that gives you the extra point, or 3 seconds, can't remember exactly. But yeah, that's interesting of a change. And again, here's this really weird Aaron Spark. The shock-filled power triggers when you're firing missiles, which if you know anything about Aaron Spark, it is fire damage. It's not spark damage or shock-filled power. I really don't know what they were doing with that, as it's whoever wrote this wasn't paying attention, I don't think. But yeah, it's a little weird to read, and it is now triggered when you do fire damage. But the class mod changes, these are the big ones here. So it's funny, if you were to read this and didn't know how good the Dancer class mod is, overdrive bonuses are now increased by 50%. That sounds like a buff if you're like, you know, you don't really know what the class mod does, but it is a huge nerf to Rafa. And I'm surprised I haven't seen more people talking about this, because it's a 200% drop to his gun damage, as I showed at the start there. He previously was able to get over 700% gun damage increase. Now it's cut in half, or it's cut down quite a bit. But again, that's also impacting every single overdrive skill. skill, and Rafa really relies on those. So again, Last Harvest, no longer regenerating as much ammo, you're not getting as much fire rate, you're not getting as much gun handling and action skill handling here. You're also not going to be getting as much critical hit chance when your overdrive is active. You're getting less from La Garza, giving you gun handling and action skill handling. You're getting less Deadline, giving you increased fire rate, and you're getting less El Soldado, giving you increased gun damage. You're also getting less Temerario, giving you gun damage. You're also losing Barrage, giving you less splash damage. If you took Resiliencia, you're losing a bit of damage reduction. If you use the Devil May Care, you're also losing benefits from that. Honestly, I think this kind of sucks. Rafa was not as good as Harlowe or Cash, who made out like bandits getting buffs to both of them. And yeah, Rafa has definitely dropped down a little bit as effectiveness, because those are a ton of skills that are losing like a good chunk of our percentages on. And the overdrive bonus is actually scaled up quite a bit. So it says 50%, like it's 50% less, but that translated over in gun damage to a 200% drop in his gun damage. It's like a 30 or 40% drop to the fire rate, or 20 or 30% fire rate drop. It is a pretty rough change. He still can clear things pretty quickly. It's just Rafa is very powerful, but I was kind of shocked to see this change. And yeah, I mean, it's something, which is curious because they actually buffed El Soldado here, which increased your overdrive bonuses. Previously, class mods like the Dancer didn't give you that bonus. So I'm not sure what their process was with this, but it's certainly something. This does make the Instigator class mod a bit more attractive an option. I talked about this previously in a video where I ranked all of Rafa's class mods. I think this one's a pretty solid one, but they did make changes to like the Buster class mod here. So Apophis Lance has a greater chance of not consuming a charge. It's now 40%, previously it was 30. This isn't even a change you'll really notice, as you're typically, when you're doing that, you're going to be taking the battery subscription service ability here and using all 4 charges to get infinite amounts of Apophis Lance. So that's a change that I don't think is going to be felt too much in terms of the class mod abilities. They also made some changes to the Philanthropo, which drops a grenade, and it now has a 2-second cooldown. Previously, I think it was 3 or 4 seconds. Again, they don't list it, but this isn't really that amazing, because how many times do you think you've gotten a kill based on activating your action skill and getting a free grenade to drop? Probably not very many. Also, if you're using the critical hit knife, this is pretty much just not going to activate. They also made some changes to the Esgrimidor here, so melee attacks gain a 30% critical hit chance. So I think previously it was like 25% or 20%. Again, don't really know, because I don't think anyone's really used anything other than the Dancer class mod to really recount that. But yeah, those are the changes to Rafa. It doesn't look like much, but this one here, that again, if you just read it, overdrive bonuses are now increased by 50%. You'd think, yay, he's got a buff, but no, it actually kind of, it definitely made his stats drop a lot. Now, Mo Money Harlowe, she got some changes here. So the Chrome Accelerator, you can now use Jacob's pistols to detonate it. So if you shoot at it with a Jacob's pistol, it now explodes. There's also a change to the Flux Generator, so this will no longer cost less action skill duration to activate. And yeah, those are the only 2 real changes to her kit. The rest are class mods. But as mentioned, one of the biggest buffs to Harlowe is Elemental Eaters getting reworked. Because if you're using the red skill tree here, you're typically going to want to pop your red skill or your action skill, get the extra damage from neutron capture, which will convert your gunshot damage into pure radiation damage. And if you were going against an elemental eater, good luck doing any type of damage to them. So this is actually kind of a nice change. It's not really a change to her kit, but it's a change to one of the biggest counters for Harlowe. So hey, that's worthwhile. But I actually think there are some baffling changes to her class mods here. So there's a change to the Reactor class mod. Now, I previously used to use this one quite a bit, because the best thing about the Reactor class mod is you can see there, it gets upwards of 5 points into decoherence, which is one of Harlowe's best skills. The change they made now is that whenever you get the max 10 stacks from this ability, if you entangle 10 enemies, you used to get a 20% gun damage increase with fire rate, 20% reload speed, 20% status effect damage. It's now nerfed down to 10%. I don't think that was really necessary, as no one's really using the Reactor if they have the DLC, because the phlebotomist is just so crazy. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about that change. One of the things with the phlebotomist that makes it so amazing, in my opinion, is that you can get unstable isotope, giving you 35% bonus cryo damage for 8 seconds after killing an enemy. This adds another elemental type onto your damage. It allows you to apply more statuses, allows you to freeze enemies. It is pretty insane. So yeah, losing that from the Reactor is not really that much of a change, because you can still use it very much so. It's going to be good, but you're not going to notice this nerf at all. But they also made a weird change to one of my favorites with the Skeptic. Now, I rank this as one of Harlowe's best class mods. Stasis, don't get me wrong, stasis for Harlowe is like the worst, I would say, skill tree in the entire game. It's only good for mobbing and it's kind of weak against bosses. There is some things you can do, but her green and red skill trees just do everything that you could do with the blue skill tree like 10 times better. The change that I don't understand is that they increase the damage that the radiation and crowd arts do, and it's honestly, it's not that much, not even noticeable. But they made it so that shooting an enemy with an active status effect restores 2% of action skill cooldown. This was previously 5%. The reason I used to think this was a really good skill is you would get your action skill back so fast while using this, because if you shot an enemy, you get 2% of it. It's still fine, but now you're almost forced to take the confirmative reality here. Whenever you shoot an entangled enemy, you restore a portion of your action skill cooldown. So yeah, it's a weird nerf to that class mod. I don't know if they were trying to get people to use it more so with her blue skill tree, but I also don't know if anyone's using the blue skill tree. So that caught a nerf that I don't think was needed. They could have just buffed the damage there. But there's also a change to the bio robot, which increased the cryo and radiation hazards damage. It was previously 60%, now it's 70%, and they also increased the radius of them. Now I gotta say, hazards in Borderlands 4 are pretty shitty, and this one doesn't really feel any better. And again, you're not getting really great skill rolls, so the bio robot is okay. And the driver class mod, so this got an increased lifesteal, so it's now 40% lifesteal. It was previously 30%. The driver class mod is actually pretty fun. Whenever you fire your chrome accelerator, you get drained down to all but 1 health and amps the chrome accelerator with that damage, and then the chrome accelerator gains 40% lifesteal. So yeah, that's pretty crazy because you can get your health back really quickly. This also comes stock with 12 lifesteal on it, so it's actually a pretty solid one. But yeah, it's nice to see that change, I guess. But weird that they nerfed the reactor and didn't do a single thing to the phlebotomist, which is honestly her best class mod now. But Pearlescents, why are they even in the game at this point? I really like the Pearlescents. It's fun to grind for them. I spent it was 9 to 10 hours I was grinding when the DLC came out because I really wanted to get the best rolls of the Scoon Shoot and the Crazed Earl. I ended up with like 12 or 13 Crazed Earls. It took a lot of time to farm all those. And I know a lot of people are really upset with this change because there's multiple changes to this gun. The most notable one is I think it has to be a bug, guys. I don't know why, but it went from 27,000 damage to now 9,000. That's a 1/3 of a drop. Maybe someone that was changing the file put a /3 on the damage and made it do 1/3 of the damage amount, but that's not even the worst change. They also made it so that non-melee attacks will no longer trigger the shards, and it seems like the shards just don't really trigger that well anymore either. So basically what you could do is you could use the Crazed Earl, get a bunch of shards on the enemy, and they'll explode and send them towards another enemy whenever you melee them. What you could do is use this gun and then use the Slippy Grenade, which is melee damage. You would throw it, it would activate this and explode it. That was kind of like the thought process, and it doesn't feel like that was a glitch whatsoever, but they nerfed it so it no longer does that. Now I spent 10 hours farming for the Crazed Earl, and it's not even like, honestly, this is like a white shotgun now. I'd honestly probably prefer to have one of those just because the damage from this thing is like comparable to a white shotgun. It's shocking. But they also made some good changes, I should say, as well. I don't want to sound like a negative Nancy here, but they also made some changes to the parts that you could get on these. So anything that didn't add meaningful gameplay got removed. So for the Crazed Earl, they removed some underbarrels that would, not really, I didn't really find any underbarrels that got removed. I looked through all mine, I had like multiple of them. Nothing really changed there. Also removed some magazine types that did not fit on the Crow source, such as Cov and Ripper. And also the Daedalus Pistol Soul Survivor always comes with the COV magazine and has a better chance of featuring the Atlas underbarrel. There's some other changes too. The Soul Survivor, your damage will increase immediately if an ally falls in battle. The Soul Survivor is another one that just doesn't have the damage output to make it worth taking ever. The Crow Source, projectiles that deal splash damage properly scale with increased splash damage. That's kind of interesting, but splash damage got nerfed from Rafa, so yeah, that's something. Also, the Ripper Shotgun prevented non-melee attacks from triggering the shards is possibly the worst change here alongside that massive damage nerf. Now, they made some changes to like the Torque license parts that now properly you can see what the parts do, if they're sticky or not. The hand cannon sticky projectiles explode after they should when hitting an enemy. The hand cannon is extremely hard to use, so I don't see that really getting any use. The unstable core, Nova damage gets stronger for every sticky projectile you've attached to the enemy. That was how it was supposed to work, and still it doesn't feel like it's that strong, but I probably do a bit more testing after this game. Maybe gets another patch to fix the frame rate because it's really bad. This one I don't understand. Ripper, Tank Buster, landing a shot on an enemy's head will always count as a critical hit. I'm pretty sure that's how it was always working. The Tank Buster was one of those guns that got added with the Stone Demon DLC. It'll heal enemies around it that you don't shoot, and whatever you do shoot takes that heal amount and adds it to the damage. It's an okay choice. I think it's a fun one, but yeah, I'm not sure what that really means. They also made some changes to weapon prefixes for Maliwan and the Gagoroid, corrected the shock damage, and updated the cards for the fire versions. Now, actually, one of the biggest nerfs here, this is, I know, going to make a lot of people sad. Burst Bees with the flamethrower under barrel. So we tuned the flamethrower and the bullet hose enhancement so their extra shots don't improperly stack, so you no longer can one-shot people with the Burst Bees fired flamethrower under barrel. I know a lot of people are going to be sad about that. I thought that was going to get fixed a while ago, so I just never end up using it. So it definitely sucks for those that enjoy it. The heavyweight, also really weird. So we made sure the heavyweight is making sure the most of your armor segments so you don't lose them if you miss a attack. So yeah, the unfortunate part is the heavyweight is just not worth using when the Watch for Dinner exists, giving you a 25% bonus shock damage. So there's many better shields out there. The heavyweight, as much as I like it on melee builds, it's just not that great. Also licensed part of the Merv TDR version. Throwing your gun now creates even more guns when reloading the Digi Divider, enhancement, or cackling gun Grenazerker class mod. So yeah, I feel like that could actually be good if you're into the TDR throwing builds. I'm not someone that enjoys those, but I do know there's a lot of people out there that do. So I'll have to test this out and see how that works. They also fixed the faulty detonator to give better prefixes to identify the rolls, and also the bismuth tip daggers. If you're playing Crimson Desert, you would understand bismuth is having one hell of a year. It's an actual mineral, and that's what it looks like. It is so cool. And it's in Crimson Desert quite a bit, and at the same time that this DLC came out, it was also in this, so kind of funny. But the daggers are actually really good. I personally enjoy them, especially if you can get a radiation tip dagger for Harlowe, who's going to be dealing pure radiation damage. This gives you 15% more radiation damage for each attached dagger. This one has the +1 charge, so it's 8 charges with 15%. It can actually do some pretty silly stuff with it. And the better part about this is you can throw them, your Chrome Acceleration takes that extra damage, adds it back onto your gun, which also takes that damage. So it gets pretty silly. I really do like the bismuth tip dagger, and fire shock and other elements will now keep hurting enemies as long as the daggers are stuck on them. So that's great. Protean cell grenade. I'm not sure why it says grenade, because the Protean cell is a shield and direct current now only applies when the shield has energy left. So this is, again, there's been a lot of weird little things in the notes that just seemed really strange, almost like it wasn't really wrote by anyone that's playing the game. But they did make some changes to the UI, missions, multiplayer. It is a little bit smoother if you got friends to play with. Photo mode also got some changes. I really like the photo mode in this game. I think it is pretty solid. I just wish there was like an easier button to shoot like an actual shot and put it into your screenshots, but that's something that, I mean, you can do easily enough by turning off the UI and pressing print screen. They did change this to so and high tools will now work properly. That was something that was not really working out properly. But yeah, a lot of changes across the board there. Split screen also got some changes, and there's some audio visual updates as well. Nothing super major there. Player experience on Steam Deck. From what I've heard, it says there's a more seamless experience, but in my experience, from what I've heard from people, it's crashing on Steam Deck. It's crashing on my PC. I don't have anything like super insane. I've just got a 4070, but it lost like 30 to 40 frames per second. It's kind of weird. They are continuing to investigate and make further improvements to stability and performance, so I'm hoping that this does update, because my game been crashing quite a bit. As I mentioned, I had to refilm this entire video. It was crashing a lot yesterday, but yeah, some pretty crazy changes. The winners of this is Harlowe, now no longer have to worry about her greatest nemesis, the Elemental Eaters. Cash also getting buffs across the board. I do think our next patch, that's when the Cash balance patch is coming. So they did say Cash is going to get some nerfs. I really hope that they do not nerf Cash, because he's been some of the most fun I've had playing in this game. So I'm hopeful that they don't nerf anything too harshly, because I honestly like the thought process they had earlier where they were just buffing everything. Seeing Rafa get nerfed this hard is kind of discouraging, and also seeing the Crazed Earl get a crazy nerf like it did is also kind of sucky whenever you spend 10 hours farming for it. But we'll hope that that maybe gets fixed. But yeah, Rafa and Vex only lost 45% gun damage, but it was enough when it impacts her overall life steal amounts as well, so that gives her less survivability. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Hit the subscribe button below if you enjoyed. Let me know if you want to see any more Borderlands 4 content. Haven't really been playing it much. Hopefully another update comes to fix the frame rate issues. But have yourself a great day. We'll catch you in the next one.